It's a minute past 2. Like we promised, it is the big day in South Africa where the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, is presenting the medium-term budget policy speech. It is a much anticipated speech where he is expected to lay out the medium-term view of South Africa's finances. He does so at a time when there's a lot of promise around the country, given the backdrop that we have had. We've seen a lessening of the power shortages that have characterized South Africa's economic life for the past 2 years or so. We've also seen the formation of a government of national unity that has been welcomed and has presented a stable backdrop for the country, enabling it to attract investment. Not a lot of money has come in yet, but there's been a lot of promise, and a lot of people are speaking about the fact that there is a view that South Africa is becoming a place to invest again. Not forgetting that when we talk about investment, of course, we talk about foreign direct investment, but within South Africa itself, important to get local companies to begin investing in the country again. For that, they need a stable political backdrop, which has been provided by the Government of National Unity. So this afternoon, we will be looking out to the minister, in particular, the growth numbers. The Government of National Unity has come in and said they would like to bump up growth to 3.3% from the anemic growth numbers that we've seen in the past few years. We're talking less than 1%. And we know that in the context of population growth, it means South Africans have been becoming poorer. So what sort of growth numbers is the minister going to be talking about? There's an expectation that he might well upgrade South Africa's economic growth outlook. And the minister will be speaking about that. Revenues, of course, and of course, the usual tin taxes, where is the minister going to get the money, etc., etc. As I speak, he walks over to the podium. Let's cross over to him.
Deputy Speaker Annelie Lotriet, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, His Excellency, the Deputy President Paul Mashatile, Cabinet colleagues, members of the Executive Council for Finance, honorable members, Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service, fellow South Africans. I have the honor to table the following documents before this House: the Division of Revenue Amendments Bill, the Adjustment Appropriation Bill, Rates and Monetary Amounts Amendment Bill, Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill, Revenue Laws Amendment Bill, Special Appropriation Bill, Global Minimum Tax Bill, Global Minimum Tax Administration Bill, the revised 2024 and 2025 fiscal framework, 2024-25 adjustment estimate of national expenditure, the medium-term budget policy statement. They almost have a page, all of them. Madam Speaker, today I start on a sad note. In quick succession, our country lost 3 former ministers who, in their own unique ways, made enormous contribution to our democracy. Pravin Gordhan, Tito Mboweni, and Membathi Mdladlana were deeply committed public servants, fearless leaders, and true patriots. In preparing this speech and grappling with the challenges that face the nation in reaching its social and economic development goals, the wisdom imparted by the 2 former ministers was constant source of inspiration. Pravin Gordhan will be remembered as one of the South Africa's great architects in developing a capable state, a world-class revenue authority, and unwavering in his conviction to ethical governance and sound public financial management. Tito Mboweni will be remembered for contributing to progressive labor market regulation, modernizing South Africa's monetary policy, and the passion and intellectual bravery he brought to issues of structural reforms. In one of his last public interviews, Governor number 8, as he liked to be called, spoke of the next few years being defined as the infrastructure years, where the national obsession should be on building the much-needed infrastructure. He would be proud that today, a cornerstone of our policy statement is the announcement of bold and far-reaching infrastructure reforms. Our wish is that in a small way, this policy statement and the actions it outlines can further the mission they gave their life to, that of a prosperous and a thriving nation. We acknowledge that we are not there yet, but there is a new light, and that is shining down on our country and on our economy. Our recent election demonstrated the resilience and maturity of a young democracy. The formation of a government of national unity in June, combined with the suspension of power cuts since March 2024, a leap in business and consumer confidence, the recent receding of inflation in recent months have raised all our hopes. Ours is to turn the promise of a better life for all into a reality. His Excellency, Mr. President, outlined the three priorities of the Government of National Unity. These are to drive inclusive growth and job creation, to reduce poverty and tackle the high cost of living, and to build a capable, ethical, and developmental state. Fittingly, inclusive economic growth is at the center of the work of the Government of National Unity and at the top of the national agenda. This policy statement analyzes the trade-offs and choices that the nation is confronted with, charting the path towards growth, transformation, and action. Madam Speaker, later this year, South Africa assumes the presidency of the G20 from Brazil. The theme for our presidency will be solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. Our presidency is the fourth consecutive one where an emerging economy will lead the forum that influence global economic issues. This is a rare opportunity that only comes around only every 20 years. We intend to use our voice to promote a true African-focused agenda. The G20 president gives us an opportunity to showcase to the world our beautiful and diverse country and continent and its people. Today, by presenting a policy statement that outlines a clear strategy to grow the economy and retain the health of our public finances, we are building for a better, more inclusive South Africa. Turning to the international outlook, global economic growth is forecast at 3.2% in 2024 and 2025. Global trade is expected to grow by an annual average of 3.3% and over the same period. There are several risks to this outlook. These include persistent geopolitical tensions, and the threat of escalating conflict in the Middle East remains a concern. Wars elsewhere, such as in the Sudan and the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, threaten regional and international stability as well as global trade. These risks imply that emerging markets and developing countries such as South Africa will continue to face headwinds over the medium term. Domestically, we focus on a real GDP growth of 1.1% in 2024. This is lower than the estimate of 1.3% in February. Over the medium term, growth is forecast to average 1.8%. This underscores the need for higher inclusive growth to meet the aspirations of a better life for all. This policy statement aligns our strategy to lift the economy to a higher and more inclusive growth path. The strategy is anchored in 4 pillars. The first one is maintaining macroeconomic stability. The second one is to implementing structural reforms. Thirdly, is supporting growth-enhancing infrastructure. And lastly, building an ethical and developmental state. Honourable members, Pillar 1 is about a stable, transparent, and predictable macroeconomic framework that creates a conducive environment for businesses and households to save, spend, invest, and grow. The National Treasury has the responsibility for oversight and implementation of macroeconomic policy framework. Anchoring inflation expectation is important for our macroeconomic policy framework, and this is what the Reserve Bank is responsible for. To strengthen this framework, we continue to work on assessing the suitability of monetary policy targets and to improve the levers of macroeconomic policy coordination. Pillar 2 is about implementing structural reforms, including those in Operation Vulindlela. These will continue to strengthen the economy to be more productive and international competitive, accelerating inclusive growth, economic growth, and foster much-needed job creation. The first phase of Operation Vulindlela provides a tangible evidence that structural reforms can reduce economic bottlenecks. It also demonstrates that government can collaborate effectively with business for the collective good. Some of the achievements of Operation Vulindlela include a large pipeline of about 22.5 megawatts of private sector investment in renewable energy projects, a 50% reduction in the cost of data for 1.5 gig, reduction in the waiting period for obtaining water use licenses for almost 90 days, and the introduction of an e-visa system to travelers from 34 countries. Building on these successes, the second phase will continue to prioritize network sectors. In the energy sector, we will continue to restructure the electricity supply industry, establish a competitive electricity generation market, and alleviate constraints on transmission infrastructure. In transport, we will open the freight rail network to private operators to reduce inefficiencies and cost. In water, the focus is on creating independent economic regulation and strengthening the local water service regulatory environment. The second phase will also introduce new focus areas that seek to strengthen local government, harnessing digital infrastructure, and integrating urban environments to make cities more efficient. Pillar 3 is about effective infrastructure investment to boost economic activity and enable higher growth over the medium term. In this regard, we are implementing reforms that will create conditions to attract greater private sector participation. The reforms include mobilizing significant private sector finance and technical expertise to augment the limited public sector capacity and capability. We are amending the PPP regulation to simplify requirements for undertaking these projects. The amended Treasury Regulation 16 will be published before the end of November for implementation in 25-26. The Municipal PPP Regulation 309 will be finalized by June next year. We are establishing dedicated capacity to plan, prepare, design programs that will generate a credible pipeline of projects that can be taken to the market. The Department of Water and Sanitation Water Partnership Office has 2 priority programs for non-revenue water and recycling waste water that require private sector investment. Similarly, the Department of Transport, Transnet, and Passenger Rail Agencies of South Africa are finalizing a list of priority projects that will be issued to the market in 25-26. The resolution of the Gauteng Free Improvement Project has unlocked a project pipeline to the value of 85 billion rand, for the non-toll network for the next 3 years. We are improving the capital budget process. The budget facility structure is being reconfigured into a centralized gateway for all large infrastructure projects that require fiscal support to advance. From 2025, the facility will have a continuous evaluation process instead of one window per annum. The National Treasury will, in January, publish a circular to guide the submission of proposal. Lastly, government is making a concerted effort to increase the pool of funders to diversify public infrastructure financing through new mechanisms and instruments. These include build, operate, transfer structures, and other concessions. We are developing a blended finance risk sharing platform that includes a credit guarantee vehicle that will help de-risk public sector projects while reducing government's contingent liabilities. Fiscal support is proposed for the projects evaluated in the 2024 BFI window. These include, but not limited to, 2 hospital projects, including a district hospital in Limpopo, landside capacity expansion at the Cape Town container terminal, capacity upgrades on the rail network from Watlu to Gqeberha, rehabilitation of water infrastructure in eThekwini, and student housing accommodation at 6 higher education institutions. A request for proposal will be issued this year for funders who are interested in supporting these projects, as well as projects for urban rail revitalization, disaster relief, metropolitan trading services. Funding of these will be separated from the broader sovereign borrowing and be accounted for separately. Collectively, the infrastructure reforms will strengthen planning, appraisal, contracting, financing, monitoring, and evaluation. The outcome will be faster delivery of infrastructure that supports economic growth, the expansion of access to basic services, and boosting job creation. Madam Speaker, our fiscal strategy sets to achieve the fiscal sustainability needed to support inclusive economic growth. It carefully weighs competing demands, making the necessary trade-offs between what is most urgent and what must wait given the fiscal constraint. The strategy also supports critical social services and addresses the significant fiscal and economic risks that lie ahead. It does this by prioritizing the following 4 key actions. First, it stabilizes government debt by maintaining sufficiently large primary surplus over the rest of the decade. As announced in the 2024 budget, a debt-stabilizing primary surplus will continue to anchor fiscal policy over the next 3 years. Second, it focuses on maintaining higher levels of investment by directing a growing share of public spending towards capital projects. Third, it protects critical services in the context of constrained budget resources. We do this by protecting the social wage, which supports the most vulnerable through spending on health, education, social protection, community development, and employment programs. Lastly, it focuses on the growth in the public service wage bill by ensuring that public servants are compensated fairly while implementing measures to contain overall cost. Madam Speaker, to achieve the goals of our fiscal strategy, we must better manage our debt. The debt has risen too fast and is too high. We are anticipating that government debt will reach more than 6 trillion or 75% of GDP in 25-26. We know that our debt is unsustainable because debt service costs have become the largest component of our spending, and it is rising faster than economic growth. Debt service costs will reached 388.9 billion rand in the current financial year. Put differently, this means for every 1 rand of revenue that government raises this year, 22 cents of this is paid in debt service cost. To deal with this problem, we have taken difficult steps to reduce the budget deficit. We have restrained spending and maintained stable tax collection. As a result of our measures, government achieved a primary budget surplus in 23-24 for the first time in 15 years. As I said earlier, the surplus is needed for us to stabilize debt. The primary surplus is not a pot of money. Rather, it is the difference between what government spends, excluding debt service costs, and what government collects in revenue. Over the medium term, the main budget deficit will decline from 4.7% of GDP in 2024-25 to 3.4% in 27-28, with the primary budget surplus rising to 1.8% of GDP. The primary surplus will be sufficient for debt to stabilize at 75.5% in 25-26. Debt will then decline over the rest of this decade. The key impact of this is the debt service cost will also stabilize and begin to decline over the next few years. Madam Speaker, on the revenue side, tax collection for 24-25 is expected to be 22.3 billion lower than we anticipated in February. Over the next 2 years, the main budget revenue is estimated has also been lowered by 30.2 billion. In the absence of faster growth and in the face of external risk, tax revenue will remain under pressure, forcing us to make difficult decisions on where to spend. Lower revenue also means that we cannot, and within the envelope, accommodate all the demands of the fiscus. Difficult trade-offs in all spheres of government will have to be made. By sticking to our debt-reducing strategy and confronting these trade-offs, we can create the necessary conditions for a fast-growing economy that facilitates employment. Our most immediate spending pressures will be addressed despite the weaker revenue. Compared to our estimate in February, expenditure for this year will increase mainly for the following: rollovers from the previous financial year to the value of 2.1 billion rand. 2.7 billion rand expenditure that was announced at the time of the main budget, largely for the increase in the social relief distress grant. The unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure of 2.1 billion rand, mainly for the disaster relief in a number of provinces. A special appropriation bill that mostly covers Sanral's obligations related to phase 1 of the Gauteng Free Improvement Program. A large part of this appropriation is made possible by the Gauteng provincial government, honoring its 3.8 contribution to the debt this year. Over the medium term, consolidated expenditure is expected to increase from 2.4 trillion in 24-25 to 2.8 trillion rand in 27-28. Honourable members, our democracy is underpinned by strong independent arms of state. The medium-term spending adjustments are aimed at maintaining the integrity of the key institutions and improving state capability. This is what Pillar 4 is about. It seeks to build a capable state that delivers a reasonable and reliable standard of public service, and that will foster the necessary environment for more growth and jobs. For this reason, additional funding is proposed for Parliament and the Office of the Chief of Justice, mostly to enhance operational capacity in the running of these important institutions. With the local government elections due in 2026, funds have been made set for the Independent Electoral Commission to conduct smooth elections. Additional funding for the South African Revenue Service is proposed. This is to help the organization build on its success by driving programs to enhance the efficiency of revenue collection while enhancing compliance and facilitating legitimate trade. We are also implementing initiatives like early retirement, not to merely reduce the size of the workforce, but also to introduce younger talent to the public service. This is part of building a capable, ethical, and development government. We'll be harnessing digital infrastructure to roll out critical systems in the provision of service delivery in the following four focus areas: digitizing and simplifying the application and disbursement process for social grants, broadening access to employment pathways, rolling out digital identification documents, building a centralized and accessible website for all government services, and digitizing health records management for the rollout of national health insurance. Madam Speaker, government proposes allocation of 47.9% of available non-interest spending to national government, 42.3% to provinces, and 9.8% to local government in 25-26. Let me just pause and make a point here. If that distribution does not take into account the debt service cost, the moment you include debt service cost, the ratios change. Local government, because local and provinces do not pay for the debt service cost. They are only carried by national. So the distribution changes. Local government goes up its distribution to 12.36%. I just wanted to make that point. Over time, the share of national raised revenue has steadily shifted towards local government. If you compare 2014-2015, we're sitting at 8.9% of non-interest main budget expenditure, which was transferred to local government, compared to nearly 10% that is now being received by them. In 2025 medium-term period, we'll see the implementation of the first phase of recommendations of the conditional grant review that the National Treasury completed earlier this year. This includes the merging of various conditional grants, such as education infrastructure grant and the social and the school infrastructure grant backlogs. The aim is to reduce duplication in the management of programs and to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of public spending. We're also undertaking amendment to the Public Finance Management Act and the Municipal Finance Management Act. This process of modernizing public financial management was started by the previous administration and will continue over the next months. We will publish the draft pieces of legislation next year. Madam Speaker, local government is foundational to building a capable state that fosters economic growth and responds to societal needs. Sadly, many of our municipalities face serious governance, planning, and financial management challenges. As things stand, 50 of the 257 municipalities in the country have active financial recovery plans. 3 municipalities are under national intervention, and these are Mangaung, Enoch Godongwana, and Legua. The situation is untenable in that regard. And the reality is that national government cannot intervene in all municipalities at the same time. To resolve local government failures systematically, several initiatives are underway. The ESCOM Municipal Debt Relief Program is among these interventions. Since February, when we last reported on the relief program, around 70 of the municipalities that had applied for the debt relief have been approved. Between March and August 2024, compliance with the relief conditions by municipalities improved from 55% to 76%, aided by the National Treasury, Provincial Treasury, and the Municipal Finance Improvement Program. Rand West City is the first municipality to benefit from 1/3 debt write-off. This follows its substantial achievement of the debt relief conditions for the first 12 months cycle. The more municipalities stand to benefit from the write-off of debt if they comply with the conditions of the program. We implore provincial and national departments owing municipalities to do one thing, please, pay municipalities. In turn, they should be able to pay other things. There are 2 water boards now who are about to go bankrupt because they can't be paid by municipalities. And we can't pay municipalities ourselves. And I think we should do something about that. This will enable municipalities to pay water boards, as I've said, and ESCOM so that utilities can deliver these services to citizens. Honourable members, almost 60% of economic activity is concentrated in the 8 metropolitan municipalities that are home to 6 out of 10 people in South Africa. To turn things around in municipal service provision, the reforms in trading services focuses on financial, institutional, and management changes in these metros. The goal is to improve outcomes and enable them to generate surpluses to increase investment in infrastructure. Our efforts are supportive of the intent of the white paper on local government by the Department of Cooperative Governance to reimagine municipalities as transformative vehicles equipped to respond to the needs of residents. Climate-related disasters have intensified, damaging infrastructure and disrupting life. Countries in the global south bear the largest brunt of these impacts. The increased frequency and intensity of climate disasters is costly, and we must proactively work to reduce their impact on the fiscus and on society. One aspect of disaster financing is the response and rehabilitation after an event occurred. A slow response to these emergency results in communities having to wait lengthy periods before they are finally assisted. The recommendations of the disaster risk financing strategy will be implemented from 2025 to improve readiness and response time. The National Treasury is undertaking detailed analysis of the experience of local government regarding their access to emergency financing and their ability to disperse. This analysis will help us better understand their capacity to manage a multi-layered disaster risk finance approach. It will look into the willingness of municipalities to independently manage their financial responses to disasters, exiting existing incentives to invest in readiness and their ability to set aside sufficient funds for their responses. Madam Speaker, public procurement accounts for about 19% of consolidated government spending, totaling 1.5 trillion over the next 3 years. The gazetting of the Public Procurement Act in July marked an important milestone. Though the Act has not come into effect, it sets the stage for better integration of public sector procurement. Preferential procurement and set-asides will provide meaningful participation for those who were previously excluded and disadvantaged. The Act also provides for industrialization through designation, beneficiation, intensification of labor absorption, and other measures within local communities. This is important for factories and businesses. The single national regulatory framework for procurement also promotes integrity, transparency, and measures to prevent abuse in the procurement, wasteful expenditure, and corruption. The National Treasury is consulting widely in developing regulations that will enforce the provisions of the Act. The regulation will be published in 2025, and these will pass through Parliament scrutiny prior to promulgation. As part of developing the regulations, the National Treasury will consider the findings and recommendations from the assessment of the South African procurement system using international standards and universal tool. The assessment was initiated last year, and the report will be released publicly next month. In parallel, we are intensifying our efforts to modernize, digitize, make our procurement system transparent and in line with international standards. Madam Speaker, we recently received positive review from the Financial Action Task Force, FATF. The body found that we have now largely or fully addressed 16 of the 22 action items in the action plan. This is a remarkable achievement brought about by the unprecedented cooperation between the State Department as well as with civil society. FATF lauded South Africa for improving how it deals with issues of anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. This leaves us with only 6 outstanding action items to be addressed for the last scheduled reporting cycle in February 2025. Madam Speaker, the publication of the medium-term budget policy statement represents a commitment to open and transparent budget process. It is intended to empower all stakeholders to contribute to the discussion of the nation's priorities. It makes transparent the budget framework through which government seeks to achieve the nation's social and economic development goals. I hope it is received in this spirit. Madam Speaker, over the next 3 years, we are embarking on a new journey. We will use our collective efforts to increase the pace and scale of tackling unemployment and building a stronger economy. We will turn the fresh sense of hope, energy, and fellowship into action. We must use this opportunity to create an environment for strengthened service delivery, particularly to underserviced communities in urban and rural areas. We must seize the moment to build and invest for the future. Madam Speaker, as I close, allow me to express my deepest gratitude to the President and Deputy President for their counsel, their support, and for their leadership. Thank you also to the Deputy Ministers of Finance, the National Treasury team led by the Director General, and they have walked this path with me, sharing freely their insight, expertise, and passion for our country. Thank you to the Commissioner of South African Revenue Services and the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank for their astute stewardship of these 2 key institutions. Thank you to my cabinet colleagues. Some of them knew the Ministers' Committee on the Budget Committee, Ministers' Committee on the Budget, and the Budget Council will share the heavy load of the tough decision that we must take to maintain the sustainability of our public finances. To the Parliamentary Committee of Finance, Appropriation and Public Expense, I express my sincere appreciation. And lastly, you can guess, and lastly, to my wife and my family for their consideration and support in unending field. And lastly, thank you to each and every South African. I thank you.